This podcast is for educational purposes. Our guests aren't scripted and are free to speak their minds. Therefore, their views and opinions don't necessarily reflect those of BridgeBio Pharma. Also, your doctor is your best source of information about any symptoms you might be experiencing. Please consult a medical care professional about any health questions and concerns. Now, we hope you enjoy the podcast.
And welcome to On Rare, a rare disease podcast produced by BridgeBio, a biotech company committed to developing treatments for people living with rare diseases. I'm your host, Mandy Rohrig, and as always, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, David Rintell, Head of Patient Advocacy. Hi, David.
Hi, Mandy. Always a pleasure to do this podcast with you, and today, a particular pleasure. Really excited to introduce Cerys to everyone.
Yes, this is a special episode of On Rare. We are on location in Wales. It's an effort we're trying to make to meet our guests where they're at and to have these conversations in person and really get to know them and experience what their lives are like.
It's a beautiful morning in Cardiff, Wales. We're here to speak to an exceptional person who is also a podcaster, and she lives with Limb-Girdle Muscular Dystrophy type 2I. Before we visit with Cerys, I'm very excited to welcome our colleague, Dr. Anna Talagat. Anna is the Director of Medical Affairs for ML Bio, which is a BridgeBio affiliate that works on Limb-Girdle Muscular Dystrophy. Anna, welcome to On Rare.
Thank you for having me.
We're delighted. So my first question is, what is Limb-Girdle Muscular Dystrophy? I think many of us have heard of muscular dystrophy, but not necessarily Limb-Girdle Muscular Dystrophy.
Yeah, so the limb-girdle muscular dystrophies are actually groups of diseases caused by different mutations in different genes. Folks that have limb-girdle muscular dystrophies have muscle weakness and muscle wasting. Another term for that we like to use is called atrophy. Patients with limb-girdle muscular dystrophy typically present to the clinic weakness in their muscles. These are called limb-girdle muscular dystrophies because the weakness is in the muscles that are part of the limb-girdle system, biceps, the shoulder area, the thighs, those large muscle groups called the limb girdles.
Thank you. That was very clear. We're going to be talking to Cerys, who has Limb-Girdle Muscular Dystrophy type 2I. So what does the 2I mean?
There's actually over 30 different types of LGMDs. We just use those numbers like 2 or 1, I, A, B, C as identifiers. So the LGMDs are all caused by mutations in different genes. There's kind of two major groups. There's the LGMD 1s and 2s. So 2I is an LGMD 2 subtype, and then I refers to the fact that it's caused by mutations in a certain gene, and that gene is called FKRP.
A mutation is a change in a gene, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Means that it either doesn't function or functions differently. Would that be correct?
Yes, exactly. So LGMD 2I, or 2IR9 as it's sometimes called, is caused by mutations in the FKRP gene. And that gene is responsible for producing a protein that's really important for the muscle fiber integrity and structure.
Yeah. It's a bit confusing. So there are many genes that could cause limb-girdle muscular dystrophy due to muscle atrophy and changes. I'm going to ask you if you could explain how that happens. Usually a medical condition is caused by a change or mutation in one gene.
Yeah. So that's a really great question. All the LGMDs are linked because they are all part of this really important protein complex that sits between the muscle cell and the extracellular matrix. So there's probably like close to 100 proteins that are part of this complex. Any mutation in any of the genes that are in that complex results in limb-girdle muscular dystrophies.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the extracellular matrix refers to or means.
So you have the cells that make up the muscle, but outside of the cells, you have this really important extracellular matrix. And that kind of helps keep everything together so the cells are not floating around. And it's really important, especially in muscles, because the muscle cell is linked to the extracellular matrix and it kind of has a stability function.
So the extracellular matrix kind of is meant to hold things together.
Right,
I
exactly.
see. Anna, how is LGMD2I and other limb-girdle muscular dystrophies, how are they identified and diagnosed usually?
So typically people might notice that there's a problem with walking or any type of weakness, especially in like the leg muscles and the hip muscles. So they might have a lot of trouble getting out of bed, rising from like a toilet seat or climbing the stairs. And then they go to their doctor and they're like, I'm feeling a lot of this muscle weakness. And from there, there's a series of tests that are conducted. The true way that these limb-girdle muscular dystrophies are diagnosed is through genetic testing. So there's a lot of steps from when an individual first notices a problem with their muscles being weak to confirming the specific gene that's mutated. Honestly, it could take years sometimes.
Yeah, we've learned from talking to other people with limb-girdle muscular dystrophy that it often takes a very long time to receive a diagnosis, and often people are thought to be lazy or find themselves falling behind their peers, experience difficulty walking or going up steps. But is there anything happening to expedite the diagnosis?
It's difficult to kind of pinpoint when that muscle weakness starts. And there's, of course, a lot of other diseases that can cause muscle weakness. And some of them are, for example, MS, where you have your immune system involved in that. So there's a lot of clinical medical dissection that has to go on in order to reach that diagnosis. Everyone is working to shorten that time to diagnosis, but it really is difficult.
So, what is the natural course of LGMD2I over time? I suspect that those symptoms and that weakness becomes worse, but what happens over lifespan?
Split out into two different categories of patients, some that start having symptoms very early and some that have it just a little bit later in life. The folks that have symptoms early have a little bit more severe disease and they might lose the ability to walk by the time they're in their teens or 20s. You might use a wheelchair and other mobility devices, but you're also going to have trouble reaching over your head, holding your arms outstretched. You can't lift things. And then LGMD2I specifically, there's also a high proportion of folks who have weakness of the heart muscle. Also, the muscles that you use for breathing, those become compromised. It's a very progressive disease. And then, of course, there's joint stiffness and muscle cramps, pain. There's a lot of things that these patients experience.
Very difficult to hear, and it's got to be difficult to be a person living with this condition and facing that kind of progression.
Is there anything that can impact the pace of progression? You mentioned mobility aids and how people adapt, but is there anything that can be done to influence that pace?
There's really nothing that can be done right now, and that's because there's no treatments. There's not a single treatment approved for any of the limb girdles. So there's really no way to slow down the progression of this disease.
I'm both taken aback at the seriousness of LGMD2I, but also enthusiastic about talking to Cerys and hearing her experience. Thank you very much for joining us, Anna.
Of course, thank you guys.
We've come a really long way to meet an inspiring young woman. We're really looking forward to hearing your story, Cerys, your life with LGMD2I, and how you decided to become a podcaster. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor to be here today.
Cerys, can you tell us how your story begins? When did you first learn about LGMD2I?
So at 7 years old, I received a diagnosis for celiac disease, and it was a long process from basically since I was born. So during this time I had a lot of blood tests done, and the doctors noticed that the CK levels in my bloods were very high, and CK is creatine kinase, which indicates the muscle wasting enzyme. So yeah, they noticed that there was something wrong with my muscles, which was completely unrelated to the celiac disease. And after a couple of biopsies and a genetic test, they came to find that I had Limb-Girdle Muscular Dystrophy type 2I. So that's kind of where it begins, but not quite for me, because I wasn't very aware of this. I was so consumed by my new celiac diagnosis and my change in diet. So it was really my parents who took on this diagnosis and the impact the most. So I annually had to go to Great Ormond Street Hospital in London to have some checkups with I annually had to go to the Great Ormond Street Hospital in London to have checkups with the physiotherapist, and there was never anything wrong really. You know, they would always say you're doing fine. So I didn't really think I had much of an issue. I knew I had something going on with my muscles, but I didn't fully understand the concept of it until I was about 12 years old, and that's when my symptoms started to take over. So I was always the slowest in the class. I couldn't really keep up with my peers. I was always the last finishing the race on sports days. But I just thought, you know, I'm just not cut out to be an athlete. You know, I'm just not a sporty person, and that's fine. But it wasn't until later on that I realised that my symptoms were progressing, and I wasn't just a slow person. It was more that the weakness in my muscles was stopping me. So yeah, gradually over time, my symptoms started to take over then.
So Cerys, at the very beginning, it sounds like it was really an experience for your parents. Their daughter was diagnosed with celiac disease, which requires a lot of dietary change to manage. And then they received the news also of Limb-Girdle Muscular Dystrophy. But for you at 7, did you have much awareness of this, or what do you recall?
I think after receiving my celiac diagnosis, I thought that was it. So then to have to keep going back to the hospital and getting more tests and just different things like that, I was just kind of like, oh, man, like when is this going to end? I was just a bit fed up by then, because I thought that the journey of being in hospital was over. I was just a bit fed up that the journey wasn't over, but I was told that there was kind of something else going on, but I was so young I didn't really understand it and I didn't really question it, and it was my parents that kind of took on that journey, and I just trusted them. You know, I just wanted them to figure it out. I was like, they'll sort it out, it's fine. I just need to trust the process and to try and stay calm through it, because it was a very stressful time.
And do you remember a time that you realized, oh, in addition to celiac, I have this LGMD, do I?
I always knew from the diagnosis that I had something going on, but I don't think I realised the full effect of it until I was about 12, and I had to fill out a medical letter for school, for a school trip, and my mum filled out the form and it had Limb-Girdle Muscular Dystrophy on it, and that's the first time I saw the name of my condition written down, and I think that made it feel more real then. You know, there was more to this and it felt more lifelong then. It wasn't just something that might go away. It was an actual condition. And I think my parents held off from telling me about it initially because, one, I was so young, I wouldn't have understood it, I don't think. But two, they didn't want me to Google it and look at the symptoms, because as we know, LGMD affects everyone differently, and because of the lack of research at that point, you know, this is back in 2008, there wasn't much to go off, so I'm sure the symptoms might have been quite extreme. And I was also a bit of a hypochondriac, so I'm sure I would have definitely faked some symptoms or looked out for some symptoms in some way. But also they just wanted me to have kind of a normal life growing up. They didn't want me to always worry about when the next symptom was going to kick in or whatever. They just wanted me to just listen to my own body in that way.
Tell us a little bit about your childhood and your family.
So I have two younger sisters, Caddy and Becca. So you can imagine a family dynamic with 3 young girls that are all very loud, talkative, argued a lot, but that's kind of, your average family dynamic. And so it was quite chaotic. But my parents, I think, after receiving the diagnosis for me, they got Caddy and Becca diagnosed as well. So they both also have LGMD2I. And after grasping the concept of this condition and that it's a muscle wasting condition and that it will get worse, my parents just wanted to give us as many opportunities as they could. They were great with going out on bike rides together as a family. We would cycle around Cardiff Bay on a sunny day. We went skiing once, which was just an insane experience that I will now never get to experience again because I'm just too weak to ski like I did. We climbed up Snowdon at Wyddfa, which is the highest mountain, the tallest mountain in England and Wales. So yeah, we've done a lot of things as a family, very special memories that I'll treasure forever because my parents knew that we may not be able to do this forever. So yeah, my childhood was jam-packed of different activities and lots of happy memories, yeah.
And all 3 girls, you and your sisters, play musical instruments?
So we are a very musical family. My parents are both very musical. My dad plays the piano and sings. My mum also sings and plays the trumpet and the guitar, although she would say not very well. I think she's great. So from very young ages, my dad taught us all the piano, which we grasped the concept of straight away because it's in our blood. We just loved being a musical family. We sing together, we play some instruments together. I play the harp, Caddy plays the flute, and Becca also plays the harp. So we would do a lot of family ensembles. People would call us like the Von Trapps, like the Welsh version. So yeah, we have a lot of memories of playing music together, and it's something that I still continue to do. Although not as much because LGMD has restricted me more now, and to be able to play the harp and the piano is a lot of stamina and a lot of keeping your elbows up and using your feet for the pedals for both instruments. So because I'm out of practice now, it's not something that I do too often, but it's something I love to revisit every now and again.
Can you tell us a little bit about the symptoms of LGMD2I? How does it affect you? How does it affect your movement? How does it affect your strength?
So I started high school at 12, and it was during high school that I noticed my condition slowly progressing. It is a condition that progresses very slowly over time, so it's not like you wake up overnight and there's a new symptom, but I struggled with stairs and hills. I would always have to grab onto a friend's arm to help me up the stairs or up hills, but I could still do them, independently. I was just slower. Gradually, when I started to learn to drive, that was fine for a year and a half. After I passed my test, I drove a manual car, which is a lot of leg movement. But then eventually the physiotherapist told me to stop driving because it was too dangerous, because I kept lifting my legs up with my hands because my legs weren't strong enough to lift by themselves. So that was tough. I went without driving for a year and a half. Until I came across Motability, who do adapted cars now, and I now drive with my hands, and I've got my independence back in that way. I also struggled more with getting up from seated positions or from the floor. I still go to the gym, but my routine is very different now. It is a case of adapting all the time. When I was in high school, I used to go for runs. I used to run on the treadmill, and I swam a lot, and it's something I still do. My mum was determined to keep me active and to keep my muscles going, but there was a point, and I think it was during COVID, that I lost that ability. And I think COVID made my progression move a lot quicker, I think, because I wasn't allowed to do it much. To be honest, I wasn't allowed to leave the house because I was shielding. So I think I went for my last run or jog during COVID, and I can't run now. If I ran, I would fall. Since high school, I fall, my knees just kind of give way randomly. I could be anywhere. I could be just walking down the street and my knees would buckle and I would just collapse to the ground. My friends very kindly say that I collapse like a deck chair. So if you need a visual kind of representation of what that looks like. that's been quite difficult as well. But I do notice that if I do try to run, that means that I'm trying to overwork my muscles and I would just collapse. So it is a case of just adapting to that, and now I just walk. I still struggle with the stairs a lot more. I need to grab onto rails, I need to grab onto handles getting up from seats, and I've really noticed the progression in my hips, my hip muscles. They're very weak, so I kind of waddle from side to side when I walk. My knees turn in a little bit when I walk, so I think my condition is becoming a lot more obvious to the public eye as well, which is another thing I've had to get used to because I haven't always self-advocated and I haven't needed to, and I haven't needed to tell everyone in my life. So that's also been a big change as well.
LGMD2I affects shoulder muscles, your hip muscles, your leg muscles, which makes walking challenging, getting in and out of a car challenging, in and out of a chair, and stairs.
Yeah, and now little things as well, like getting dressed. To put my socks on, I need to lift my legs, so I need to use my hands for that. I've also noticed weakness in my shoulders and my arms. You know, if I hold them up to do my hair for too long or my makeup, then I can really feel my muscles kind of working overtime, so I need to be careful there.
Cerys, we'll move on to your podcast in a little bit, but on your most recent episode, you talked about taking a trip and bringing a wheelchair with you. It sounded like you had mixed feelings about using a wheelchair.
I've always had mixed feelings about using mobility aids because growing up I didn't see any representation of young people using wheelchairs unless they'd temporarily broken their leg or something. But it was always just old people that I saw in wheelchairs. And so the concept of needing a wheelchair before I was, quote, old was scary for me because I just didn't think it was normal. And also I think people can view using a wheelchair or any kind of mobility aid as a sign of defeat, whereas actually it's just there to help you. And the more I've used it, the more I've learned to embrace it. So I'm not fully wheelchair dependent at this time, but I do use it for support when it comes to days out, if there's a lot of walking and I can't keep up. It's gotten to the point now where if I do go on a trip with some friends, they would encourage me to take the wheelchair because if I didn't, then we'd constantly need to find somewhere to sit down and take breaks just for me, and I would hold them back and they wouldn't be able to do as much because they'd always have to wait for me. So I guess having the wheelchair and being able to use that with people has just made me feel like less of a burden. They'd always have to check up on me, whereas when I'm in the wheelchair, we can just go. I'm happy, people can push me around, that's fine. But yeah, it is something that's there to help you, and it has taken some time to get used to, and I think I would still squirm at the thought of being in a wheelchair in front of everyone I know, but that's something that hopefully will go over time. And I think what's really helped me is seeing representation online of other young women using wheelchairs and still living their best life.
It can feel like a defeat. However, it really expands the range of distance you can go and, of course, then the speed. It's a hard thing to get used to, but it's also, as you say, a useful tool in expanding your horizons.
Yeah, it gives you more freedom rather than restricts you, which I think a lot of people see that as.
Yeah, it allows you to stay active and engaged and keeps your world expanded. Can we go back to one thing that you were talking about a little bit earlier? There's a symptom, it sounds like, of LGMD2I that is invisible, and that is fatigue. You were mentioning how your muscles get tired. What clues you into your fatigue?
I just kind of know. I mean, sometimes if I'm sat down for too long, my joints can feel really stiff and my muscles can feel a bit underworked. So that means, okay, I need to do a lap around the block or something just to keep myself going. But then I just have some intuition. I would know if I can feel a slight twinge in one of my leg muscles, because I do get pain if I overdo it.
Then how you communicate that fatigue to others?
So I'm a very stubborn person and I tend to push myself until I crash, which isn't good. I don't recommend that. But that's probably where I see my fatigue the most, because I do like to get things done. I like to be productive. I like to socialise and just do a lot of different activities. But having this condition has forced me to separate them and to do them all in little bits and in moderation to manage my energy levels, because unfortunately I don't have endless energy supply. You know, I have to be very careful because, there is a high chance I could just burn out, and that looks like just suddenly having no energy left, just wanting to lie down and have a nap or just sit somewhere quiet and just kind of recharge. A lot of people use the spoon theory. For me, that doesn't really work because I never know how many spoons I have. You know, I've never really grasped that concept. Do you guys use the spoon theory?
We do, like you have so many spoons and an activity requires so many spoons, so then how much do you have left?
I don't know about you guys, but I don't wake up with 14 spoons in my bed. I always said to my parents, I'm using too much energy coins here, you know, I'm spending too much. Another thing I like is like a battery percentage. If I'm feeling a little bit rough, I would just stop and look at myself and think, okay, how much battery percentage do I need? Do I need to sit down and recharge for a little bit? Doing things that non-disabled people do takes a lot more energy than it would for them, because, you know, for an average non-disabled person, walking up a hill might take up 5% of their energy. For me, it will take up 50%. So that's another way I like to look at it.
So it sounds like you're constantly calculating how much energy you currently have, how much something might expect of you, and budgeting and banking what you have available and want to be able to accomplish in that day.
Definitely, yeah. It's all a case of just reassessing how I feel, and every day is different with LGMD. So, you know, maybe today I might feel like I have a bit of energy and I can do a certain activity, but then tomorrow I'd have maybe less energy because of it, or I would just randomly wake up with no energy and not be able to do the things that I was hoping to do. So it can be easy to kind of beat yourself up for not doing things that you hope to do that day. You have to just give yourself some grace because, you know, your energy levels can fluctuate so much. So it is a case of just stopping every now and again and calculating, do I need to take a break or am I okay to carry on for a little while?
So can you tell us about your current living situation? You're a young adult, you're not living at home with your family?
So I now live in my own apartment with my boyfriend Tristan of 5.5 years. Depends when this goes out, it might be 6 by then. But yeah, so we live together and we live on a ground floor apartment, which is great for me because it's step free. But he helps me so much, you know, with day-to-day things. And we do know each other quite well by now, so he knows my symptoms are getting too much. He knows if I need to take a break and he's ready to take on some extra housework or something if I'm too tired. But he is good at kind of helping me regulate my symptoms, and we have a good kind of system going on.
I wanted to ask, it's a hard question to ask, and I'm guessing a hard question to think about. Your symptoms started at age 12, 10 years ago?
11 years ago, yeah.
11 years ago. And you've noticed that the LGMD has progressed. And how do you think about the future and what may happen with LGMD and what your life will be like?
Wow, what a question. Many times during my life, I've had a vision of what my future would look like, and many times I've had to change that vision. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. I went to university to study theatre, and I wanted to go into theatre, but then I quickly realised that it's not a sustainable place for someone with a progressive condition. So I went into a completely different career than I was hoping to go into, but I have no regrets. I won't look back at that, you know, I'm definitely where I need to be. But, you know, having no expectations for the future is probably the best way to think, because, yeah, that means that you're just open to anything. And yes, my condition has progressed and I do worry about so many things in the future, but I know that there's ways to adapt to it. I know that there's people in my life that I can lean on. I'm very privileged and grateful for the people in my life that I can turn to. And yeah, there's a lot of specialists around now as well that knows more about the condition, and something I didn't have growing up. There's so many connections now that I've made with other people with LGMD that are older than me, younger than me, and I'm learning so much from them and what they've managed to do. A big thing is starting a family and how I would go about that. That's something that I've spoken to a lot of people with LGMD that have yet to go into that kind of stage in life, but a few of them have said to me that they would never have children because they're not willing to take the risk to get pregnant and have children because, you know, the risk is too great, you know, that they might progress even further and they don't want to lose that. And I completely understand that, you know, it's a big subject to approach, but I am slightly more hopeful that there are specialists that can give advice and lots of other people with LGMD that have gone through different experiences that I can kind of connect with.
Actually, one of our podcast participants discussed this decision at length and was advised not to have children.
And she did.
And she did. That episode is with Lacey called
Love Isn't Love Till You Give It Away.
Love Isn't Love Till You Give It Away.
That'd be amazing, yeah. I'd love to listen to that.
It's very beautiful.
In terms of LGMD2I, what gives you hope?
One thing that gives me hope is the community. The LGMD community is a great place to be because as much as the people in my life kind of understand what I'm going through, there's no one that can fully relate to it as much as other people going through the same thing as you. And that's the case for any kind of situation. So just knowing that there's other people going through the same things as me, through the same symptoms, the same life choices, the same fears for the future, that I'm not alone in that just, you know, makes a world of a difference. And what I'm hoping to do with my podcast, as I'm sure we'll get into, but that is definitely one thing that gives me hope. I know there's a lot of trials going on right now for different gene therapies and research into a cure for LGMD, and so that gives me hope, maybe not for me or my generation, but for any future generations with LGMD. But what gives me hope is the fact that I'm still alive, and I think life is too short to worry about different kind of things, and there's always going to be someone worse off than me. So I'm still very grateful for the life that I'll have, and it'll look different from what other people are doing, and it will be tough, you know. I'm not saying it'll be a breeze, but, you know, I have the support system around me, and I have the hope that my life will still look good regardless, hopefully.
So you've made a lot of connections and you developed your own community. Can you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
So during COVID, I got into listening to podcasts, and I think it was becoming quite a popular thing to have a podcast or listen to a podcast. And I had previous experience working in radio, interviewing different people, not about disabilities, but just in general. And I've always been interested in editing and that kind of world. But it wasn't until after COVID that I decided actually I would love to start a podcast, and I just didn't really know what to talk about because unless you're a celebrity, no one cares about your life pretty much. So I needed a kind of a talking point. I needed a subject. And I thought it would be good to maybe mention my LGMD, but I didn't want it to be all about that because who's going to listen to a podcast about some girl complaining about her disability? But it kind of turned out to be something very similar. I didn't want it to just be about me. I wanted it to be an opportunity to share some stories from people that may not have the chance to share their stories. So in 2023, I made it a New Year's resolution to start a podcast. I decided on this topic because growing up, I didn't know anyone else my age with a disability. I didn't know anyone else that was going through the same thing as me. And even though my sisters had the diagnoses, they weren't barely affected at this point, and they still don't have similar symptoms to me. So we are still very different. So I just wanted to be the voice that I wish I had growing up and could turn to in my struggles. So that's what I hope to do, and what I'm still hoping to do is to just be the voice that people need if they feel alone, but also to raise awareness of different disabilities and chronic illnesses and any kind of life barrier, I call it. It's not just about disabilities. And there's so many amazing stories and amazing people out there. It's just been incredible to make those connections. And since I started my podcast and it's been shared by different charities and organisations, and people have started to reach out to me to say that they're listening and that they love it and it's something that they can finally relate to, and they say that listening to my podcast feels like listening to themselves, which I don't think they realise it helps me just as much, knowing that I'm not just speaking out into the void and not making much sense, there's actually people that are relating to what I'm saying, and that really helps me. So yeah, over the past couple of years, I've made some valuable connections. I've met up with some people with the same condition as me or different conditions, and my community online is just ever growing, and I'm so grateful.
Yeah. It's uplifting. It's authentic. Really enjoyable to listen to, regardless of your circumstances.
Thank you so much.
We interviewed another woman who has a child with a rare condition who started a podcast, and she really taught us that podcasts are a way to make connections and build community.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried to find a balance between, I don't want it to be a pity party, and I don't want it to be some kind of fake positive, everything is amazing. There is a balance for that, pun intended. And it's just kind of showing the real and raw emotions that we go through, but also showing that life doesn't end, it's just different.
So say the name of your podcast and how many episodes you've done.
I have 52 episodes, but I've recorded many more, and my podcast is called Unbalanced with Cerys. It's available on all podcast platforms and YouTube as well. So I started off just doing audio, and now I do a mix of audio and video episodes, which is very exciting. We have the solo, and then a couple weeks later we have interview, and then back and forth solo interview every other week. But I've been very fortunate to record with some amazing guests recently, and I also do some episodes in the Welsh language. Welsh is my first language, and I know a lot of people like to seek advice and comfort in their own mother tongue. But I do have a sponsor for my podcast in general, and that's Cure LGMD2I. Ever grateful for their support. Kelly Brazo was one of the first people that my parents got in touch with when I was first diagnosed, and without her, we would be completely lost. We benefit so much from all the work that she and her charity are doing, and we love her so much and her whole family. They're amazing.
And we have included a link to your podcast, Unbalanced, in the podcast description for this episode of On Rare.
Amazing.
Cerys also has a full-time job in addition to her podcast.
Believe it or not, this isn't my full-time job.
We've really enjoyed getting to know you and living well with LGMD2I.
Thank you so much for having me.
We have really enjoyed our time with you in Cardiff. Thank you for making time for us today, and I hope we can stay in contact.
Definitely. It's been great to chat with you guys.
I'm so impressed by Cerys and her ability to normalize life with a disability. In her podcast, Unbalanced, as a young person, she has really helped illustrate how life can still be full and active and vibrant, even despite having some physical challenges.
I really admire and respect how Cerys has taken her own experience and used it to help make connections between other people living with disabilities. And I'm reminded about what Effie Park said on this podcast, is that you have to find your people. I think that Cerys's podcast helps other young adults living with disabilities find their people. She's doing a great service to the community.
She's very poised and professional.
Agreed. And she's eloquent.
Mm-hmm. And she just has such a warm, thoughtful grace. She's truly a joy to be around.
And we were with Cerys and her family last night, and with Tristan, and it's a really supportive family, very close. Just want to give recognition to them as they hear this podcast. Their support has really helped Cerys in everything that she does.
Thank you, David. This was a fun, inspiring On Rare on location. Thank you to Anna for sharing her knowledge with us about LGMD2I, and thanks to Cerys for a really enjoyable conversation. Thank you to our producer, Amy Brooks, for questions or comments. Write on rare at bridgebio.com. And to learn more about LGMD2I, here are some advocacy organizations working to improve the lives of people living with this condition: the LGMD Awareness Foundation, the Speak Foundation, and the Cure LGMD2I Foundation. If you liked this podcast, please subscribe. Thank you for being with us today at our On Rare on location, and we hope you join us for our next conversation on Rare.